Hello, it's Tracy. Today I'll be constructing an album from scratch, the cover, binding, hinges, and pages. When I first started crafting, I would buy blank albums to fill them with pretty paper. After a while, I started needing different size albums or different colors and had to learn how to make my own. Once you understand the basics of building a cover, a binding, and pages, you can modify the size or page layout. The possibilities are endless. Today I'll show you how to make an album with a cover that is 5.5 inches wide, 6.5 inches long, and 2 inches deep. Our general page size will be 5 by 6 with 3 sets of pages in our binding, 1 set for each hinge. Each set will have 6 pages for a total of 18 pages in our album. We'll add some simple pockets and easy flip outs. Here's a decorated album, just showing our inside cover and our first page, which is again that flip out. Our second and third page, our third page is going to have a pocket, as well as our fourth page. And our fifth and sixth page will just be regular pages. And again, that repeats 2 other times with our hinge system. And again, here's the view of those hinges. As I mentioned earlier, everything here is transferable. Here's a smaller version of the same album that I made, just to show you that you can just adjust the measurements and make any size you need. Let's talk about supplies. To complete this project, you're going to need cardstock. I'm using Cereal Color Blue cardstock from Cardstock Warehouse, an 80 pound. You're going to need a scoreboard and a bone folder, a paper trimmer, a ruler, some scissors, and a 12 by 12 medium weight piece of chipboard. I'm using black because we'll be creating a blue album. You're also going to need some adhesive. I used art glitter glue for my liquid adhesive, as well as 3 different types of score tape, 1 inch, 1/2, and a 1/4 inch score tape. Let's talk about our cover. All of our measurements for our cover are included in my blog. We're going to need chipboard and cardstock. The 2 pieces of cardstock will measure 12 by 8.5, and we will combine those to get 1 piece of cardstock, 15.25 by 8.5. The first thing we're going to do is take our 12 by 12 medium weight chipboard and cut it to 3 pieces. Again, 2 that are 5.5 wide by 6.5 long, and 1 spine measuring 2 inches and 6.5 inches long. These are going to be laid out on top of our cardstock with 1/8 inch margins between the pieces and 1 inch margins around our piece of cardstock. We're going to take our 2 pieces of 12 inch by 8.5 cardstock and adhere them together to form our cover. We're going to overlap one of the sheets by 2 inches using 1 inch score tape in order to achieve this. With your 1 inch score tape, lay 2 pieces on the rightmost side of one of your sheets of paper, flush with the edge. You can either rip or use your scissors to trim the score tape. Use your bone folder to adhere your score tape. Remove the score tape backing and adhere the other sheet of 12 by 8.5 paper on top of the sheet with the score tape. We want this to measure 15.25 inches. So I'm first measuring. I picked a side that had 12 inches, and then I need an additional 3.25 inches. So I'm gonna make marks with my pen at the 3 1/4 mark, measure it off, and then go ahead and cut it in my paper trimmer. Again, just confirming my measurement that this measures 15 1/4 inches. Our next step is to score our cover in our scoreboard. So landscape or longwise, we're going to go ahead and score our cover at 1 inch. Score again at 6 1/2 inches. Again at 6 5/8, at 8 5/8, at 8 3/4. And then our next score line is at 14 1/4. Since my scoreboard only goes up to 12, I'm gonna flip this over and score at 1 inch, since we know our paper measures 15 1/4 inches. Next, we're gonna wanna score portrait, or on the 8 1/2 inch side, at 1 inch on both sides, or 1 inch and 7 1/2 inches. And since your paper is longer than 12 inches, you might have to flip it over a few times to get the score on both sides. What we did is create 1 inch margins around our chipboard for our cover. So now I'm just taking a bone folder and folding on each of the fold lines for each of the sides of my cardstock. Next, I'm going to adhere down our chipboard pieces that we cut earlier. You have two options. You can adhere them down with score tape. If you are going to use score tape, I recommend using 1 inch or 1/2 inch. I'm a messy crafter, however, so I'm going to use liquid adhesive, again, my art glitter glue, only because it's far more forgiving. If I stick this down, I have a couple seconds to move it, versus the score tape where I know I can't personally put these down exactly where they need to go within the margins that we created. So the glue just is a little bit more forgiving. So either one works. The most important thing to remember is to leave those 1/8 inch margins clear so we can easily close our cover. Once your chipboard is adhered to your cardstock, you then want to tape the outside 1 inch margin that we created. I'd recommend 1/2 inch score tape for this job, or if you have 5/8 of an inch, that's fine also. You do not want to use 1 inch. You don't want it touching the chipboard. So I'm just going to put this on all 4 sides of my cardstock. In order to fold in each of the 1 inch margins, it makes it a little bit easier if you go ahead and cut off on an angle the corners. You will not see these. I leave about 1/8, maybe a little bit more of an inch on each side. You can measure it off if you'd like. Again, since we're not going to see it, I'm just going to cut, again, just on a diagonal, leaving just a tiny bit of cardstock at the corners. And again, I'm going to make sure that all of our edges fold over nicely before I remove the adhesive on the score tape, because I want a nice tight hold on each of these margins. I recommend using a bone folder for this, and again, just scoring lightly between the pieces of chipboard to make sure, again, you're going to have an easy time when you want to open and close your cover. After you've folded over all the margins, you just want to very gently close your cover for the first time and make sure everything works. And we've successfully created our cover. Now let's talk about our binding and our hinges. Again, all the measurements can be found in the posting. Our hinge system needs to be at least 1/4 inch smaller than our binding. Our cover is 6 1/2 inches high, and our hinge system will be 5 3/8 inches. So with our 8.5 by 5 3/8 inch cardstock, we're going to use our scoreboard and our bone folder and score it 2 inches, and then every half inch to 6.5 inches. So 2.5 inches, 3 inches, 3.5 inches, 4 inches, 4.5 inches, 5 inches, 5.5 inches, 6 inches, and finally 6.5 inches. We're creating our hinge system and 2-inch margins on each side of the hinge system to easily help us adhere this to our binding. And this creates our hinge system. Using our 1/2-inch score tape, we're going to adhere this together to make our hinges. I'm going to skip a row and write tape, then make an arrow on the next row. Then skip a row, write tape, make an arrow on the next row. Again, skip a row, write tape, and make an arrow. So we've created 3 hinge sets. Using our 1/2-inch score tape, we're going to tape over where we wrote the word tape. So it's skip a row, put your tape, skip 2 rows, put tape, skip 2 rows, put your tape. Now one at a time, we're going to remove the backing on the score tape, and we're going to fold it up to the next row. So the second row is being folded to the third row, or directly on top of the arrow. So you're folding up from tape up to the arrow. And I'm going to fold it back and repeat the process. I'm going to remove the backing on the score tape, fold that up to the arrow. So it's on top of the arrow. Use my bone folder, fold it back, and then one more time, same thing. So this is actually the back side. If we flip this over, this is our hinges. We've now created, as you can see, 3 hinges. And on the reverse side, we're going to actually tape it and adhere that to our cover binding. And if you look, we have score lines exactly at the 2-inch margin. And that's exactly where we're going to adhere this on our cover. You're going to want to grab the biggest score tape that you have. 1 inch is fine. If you have anything bigger, you can use that as well. We're going to tape the entire back of that binding with our score tape. You can be messy. The most important thing is that there's one in the middle, one at the top, and one at the bottom. You also want to put the adhesive horizontally instead of vertically, because we want to run opposite our hinge system. And as I said earlier, I'm a super messy crafter, so I'm going to trim the excess score tape away from the binding using my scissors. So again, this is going to lay right on top of our binding. Again, lining up that 2-inch margin with our left-hand side. So those are right in the center, centered at the top and at the bottom. Right now, I'm just making sure my score tape is really adhered. This is probably the most important part, this hinge system. Just remove the adhesive, and then again, using that 2-inch as a guide, we want to go ahead and adhere this down to our cover. Again, center, top, and bottom, right on that score line, right on the score line on the cover. And just using your bone folder, gently reinforcing those score lines on top of our cover and our hinge, and gently closing. And now you can see we have 3 hinges in our binding. Now it's time to make our inside covers look nice and neat. We need 2 sheets of 5 3/8 by 6 3/8 of our cardstock, and we're gonna adhere these on the inside of our cover. You can use score tape or liquid adhesive. I'm going to use liquid adhesive. If you want to use score tape, I'd recommend 1 inch here, just making sure it's at least on the outsides of your edges. And you can use your bone folder to make sure that's all adhered down. And just clean up my mess. The next thing we're going to do for our hinge system is place our score tape on both sides of each hinge. Now our hinges are 1.5 inches high, so we don't want to use 1.5 inch score tape. You want to use something smaller. I'm going to use 1/4 inch score tape to tape these. If you don't have 1/4 inch, you could use 2 pieces of 1/8 inch, but again, you want to use something smaller than 1/2 inch. And you want to adhere the tape right at the top of the hinge, not at the bottom of the hinge. So there should be some space at the bottom. Again, taping both sides of the hinge, making sure the tape is towards the top of the hinge. And you're going to repeat that for all 3 hinges. Again, really important to make sure your tape is at the top of the hinge, because when you flip the hinge, you don't want the tape sticking to your binding. And now let's work on our pages. So for our pages, we'll be making 3 page sets. For each set, you're going to need 1 5x12, 2 10x6, and 1 5x4 pieces of cardstock. Typically, I would assemble these pages, make each page set, and then I would decorate before putting them into my album. However, here, since I'm not going to be showing decoration, we're just going to go ahead and make the pages and then put them into our album. I'm going to start with the 10x6 pages. Again, you'll need 2 for each set. And you want to score landscape at 5 and then fold in half. And again, you want to do this with both sheets. Again, scoring at 5, folding in half. Next, grab your 12x5 and we're going to score that landscape the long way at 6 inches. And we're going to fold that in half. And that's going to flip up in our album. Finally, grab your 5x4. This we're going to score portrait at 2 inches. This is going to make our folder pockets. So not that way, this way, at 2 inches. And then I want to fold in half. And we're going to eventually adhere this here again to make that pocket. So before we assemble our page sets, let's just do a quick walkthrough of the album again. The front page flips up, top to bottom. The second page is just a blank page. Our third page has a pocket, as does our fourth page. In between the third and fourth page, there's room for another pocket in case you want to do an insert, like a photo insert. And the 5th page is blank, and the 6th page is blank. Okay, we're going to grab our 5x12 and one of our 10x6, and we're going to adhere the 5x12 on top of one of the 10x6. I'm going to use liquid adhesive. Again, score tape's fine. I just want to adhere here the back of the piece that flips up to the one that flips open. And I can just use my bone folder to make sure this is all adhered. So as you can see, the first page flips open and then flips to the left. And I'm a mess, so I'm gonna grab a baby wipe. Now grabbing our second 10x6, we're gonna adhere that to the back. What we wanna do here is only apply glue or tape on the top and bottom flaps. We need to make sure that we leave an opening for our hinge at the bottom, and we need to make sure we want an opening on the right side in case you want to insert some type of folder. So again, I'm just gonna put adhesive. I'm using a 1/4 inch score tape on this on the top and bottom. Again, on the left side is where our hinge system is gonna go, and the right side, I'm making a pocket. And I'm just cleaning up my mess here. And just to show you that again, so our pages are going to go around this hinge. So again, that's why I'm not taping the left-hand side, because otherwise I can't put it onto my hinge system. Then removing the backing of the score tape, I'm just adhering this to my other page that opens in the exact same way. Just want to make sure that's adhered with my bone folder. So again, first page opens up and down. Our next page will open left to right. Same for our next pages. And you can see that whole opening, that's where we're going to slide over our hinge. And if I didn't want that opening on the right-hand side for a pocket, I could just use some score tape on the right-hand side. Right over the hinge. And just to show you what this is going to look like when we remove the backing of that score tape, that's the hinge and that's where your page will be inserted. Before we do that, we do need to add the folder insert. So on the 1, 2, 3rd and 4th page, we're going to adhere this down. In order to do that, we want to grab our 5x4 that we scored at 2 inches, and we want to apply adhesive on the right and left sides of our folder. Here I used 1/4 inch score tape. Of course, regular liquid adhesive would work as well. And we're going to remove the adhesive and put this at the bottom of the 3rd and 4th pages. Again, a pocket. And you do want to make sure it doesn't get in the way of your fold on the left. If it does, you could always trim it a tiny bit shorter. So again, first page opens top to bottom, 2nd is blank, 3rd and 4th have the pockets on both sides and the insert, and 5 and 6 are blank. Now we're ready to assemble our pages on our hinges. I just again want to point out, I would decorate my pages typically before I would put them in my album. First thing we want to do is cut off these corners to make it a little bit easier to slide on our page sets. Just a little trim, you're not going to see them. Doesn't have to be perfect. Just again, cutting down just a tiny bit. This is just to make it easier to slide on our page set. I'm going to remove the backing from my score tape, being very careful not to fold this down. Finding the opening in our page set, we're going to slide that on over and make sure we are on both sides of the hinge and we're centered from top to bottom in the position we like it. And then we're going to go ahead and press down and then use our bone folder to make sure that hinge is adhered. And we're going to repeat that 3 more times. I am going to speed up the video. This is just repeating this process 2 more times. Again, scoring the 10x6 at 5, scoring the 5x12 at 6, and the 5x4, that one was at portrait at 2. Assembling our page sets. We only put tape at the top and bottom for that 3rd to 4th page. Again, so we have that pocket to adhere our hinge and our pocket to allow something else to go inside. Remembering to put score tape only on the right and left sides to create that pocket on our 3rd and 4th pages. And again, showing you how to do that hinge making sure to cut off both sides so you have an easier time slipping on your page set, removing the front and back backing, sliding on between third and fourth pages, and making sure to burnish that down. And you'll repeat that one more time. And just adhering our last page set. Again, you can modify these pages any way you want. Again, just making a pocket in order for you to attach that hinge is the critical thing. And we have a completed base album with 3 page systems. Thanks for joining me. Love to see what you create.